You have your main ideas that you want to convey to your listeners, and spitting out those facts at your audience is not enough to fully develop your main ideas. Each idea needs to be supported by supporting materials, and only then it becomes fully developed and easy to remember. In this video, we'll talk about different types of supporting materials and how you can combine them to achieve depth and completeness in conveying your main points. Let me share my screen. I prepared another infographics for you to follow along. Here we go. Well, first, let's take a look at the most common types of supporting materials and see how these supporting materials can instruct our language choices. Again, we want to make an impact on our listeners with our speech, and making creative and imaginative language choices will help us to achieve this goal. First, rhetorical devices, also called figures of speech. Here we're talking about analogies. If you need to compare something to show connection between two things, you use analogy. We're talking about metaphors. America is a melting pot is a great example of a metaphor. Something like euphemisms, when we use he was let go instead of they fired him, or she passed away instead of she died. Irony, your hands are as clean as dirt, example of an irony. Personification, an opportunity knocked in his door. Simile, he is brave as lion. Oxymoron, when there is a phrase that is self-contradicting, like black snow, okay? Rhetorical devices are supporting materials in themselves, and they also help you to be creative and imaginative with your language. Here, just list some of rhetorical devices. I'm sure the list is much longer. You can use any other devices that you like. So rhetorical devices, again, is a type of supporting materials, and they also help you a lot with language choices. Next type of supporting materials are statistics, and that's where we talk about numbers and percentages. Next one are stories, then results of the studies and visual aids. And in a few seconds, I'll give you some examples to illustrate how those supporting materials can be used to be effective and how we can combine them. This list of supporting materials is by no means exclusive. There are also some other supporting materials out there. In this video, we'll cover major types of supporting materials that I see students using in their speeches. And once you know these types, then you can go ahead and explore others, start adding them to add even a bigger variety to your speech. Few things to know about supporting materials. Different supporting materials are appropriate for different speech topics. For example, if you're talking on a topic about history or about culture, most likely you'll use stories, rhetorical devices, and visual aids, right? You're not gonna include lots of statistics, lots of results of the study on those topics. On the other hand, there are some topics that call more for numbers to better be illustrated. Use a combination of supporting materials to develop each subpoint for your topic. If your nature of your topic calls for lots of numbers, just don't do numbers only, add a variety and mix them up. And go even deeper and skillfully combine different supporting materials within one subpoint or within one point. For example, you can look at what you have, say, okay, this is my statistics. Is it easy to understand, or do I need an analogy here? How can I help my listeners better understand what I mean? Maybe you can ask yourself, like, okay, I'm doing a comparison here. Should I use a graph as a visual aid to better illustrate the difference between what I compare? Always keep your listeners and their needs in mind as you develop your main points. Let's see what the examples are of those supporting materials and how they are combined well together. Usually statistics and rhetorical devices, particularly analogies, go well together. Knowing numbers are important, but if your listeners have a hard time interpreting those numbers and understanding their impact, then those numbers are not much of a use. Let's look at the example. Your big topic is water scarcity, right? Your statistics could be only 1% of fresh water on planet is available for humans to drink. Now, for an average human being, like for myself, it's really hard to imagine what that 1% of all fresh water will look like. So to illustrate your point, you are following with analogy. You're comparing. We can say something like, if you take 26 gallons of water and put them in front of you to represent all fresh water, only half of a teaspoon of those 26 gallons would be available for humans to drink. Okay, so here you are showing a comparison to illustrate your point. You can also stack up statistics, say one number and follow with another number. For example, a topic, importance of cats in Egypt. Your statistics could be something, a farmer stumbled on the cat cemetery in Egypt. And when they dug it up, they discovered it had 19 tons of bones. Okay? Big, huge number, follow up with another number, which is equal to the remains of 80,000 cats. That's a lot of cats, okay? So that was statistics. Now let's look at the next one, stories. One important thing about the stories is make your stories concise and to the point. For example, you want to talk about significance of the African dance. Your story could go something like, when Africans were sold into slavery across the ocean, they became detached from their cultural communities and they needed to survive. They wanted to resist slavery, so they started to use music and dance as a way to communicate. For example, when slaves were forced to exercise on the ship, they used a particular sequence of dance steps to talk to each other and to remember their past in Africa. And sometimes they took the other sequence of steps to poke fun at the owners. Dance and music were their way to culturally express their resistance to slavery. Okay, so I like stories because they allow you to maintain a better eye contact, because again, you're interpreting the story using your own words, and unlike numbers, it flows a little bit smoother. Another example of a story, invention of the microwave. During the Second World War, magnetron was widely used because it was needed for radars to generate high frequencies. It was very important and needed. And once the Second World War ended, the engineer Percy Spencer was looking for other uses of magnetron. And the solution came very unexpectedly. One day, Percy Spencer was standing next to the device, and in his pocket, he had a chocolate bar, which melted. That's how microwaves were invented, and that's when Percy Spencer became rich. Okay, so there are different examples of the stories. See what works for your topic and choose an appropriate stories. Usually they work really well because they make your point memorable. People remember the story, and this is how they connect to your information, to your main point. Okay, so we talk about rhetorical devices, about statistics and stories. Next, let's talk about results of the studies. Here we also have numbers, but they're put in a bigger context. So, for example, researchers at UC at Davis conducted a study and found out that out of 120 participants who participated in this meditation study, 90 reported a significant decrease in anxiety and depression after they meditated for 17 minutes daily for 6 weeks. There are lots of numbers. That's a great result of the study, but remember, your listeners are listening, right? They're not reading. This is an oral discourse. This is not a written discourse, which means they might not understand the significance of those numbers. So here would be a good place to follow up with an analogy and say, let's imagine there are 20 of you in this room, in which case, according to the results of the study, 16 out of all of you would benefit from meditating daily. Okay. Continuing about stacking up supporting materials, we can combine results of the study with a visual aid. Our topic is English pronunciation in Canada, and here we have a graph. Pay attention how I interpret this graph. Pay attention, I'm not reading what is there, but I know the information and I'm conveying that so my listeners could follow along and understand. The study was conducted by Chambers in 2002 to shed a light on evolution of pronunciation in Canadian English. In this graph, green color represents participants who aspirate after W. And pink color represents those who don't. From left to right, we see their birth years, and they progress from 1920 on the left to 1980 on the right. What do we notice? We notice that towards the left, there's a lot of green color, which means older participants would pronounce H or would aspirate after W, in which case the words would sound like where, why, what, and will. And we also see the predominance of the pink color on the right side of the graph, which means that the younger participants did not aspirate, and they would pronounce where, wine, whale, and where, wheel. I hope you noticed I'm not just showing the graph, I'm interpreting it. I'm saying what colors stand for. I explain what we see at the bottom, right? It's a birth year progression. And I've been very clear with those, how the correlation between the colors and the birth year. So again, remember to interpret what your listeners see on the visual aid. Graphs, tables, charts could be examples of visual aid. Also maps, right? Depending on the topic, maps could also be good examples of visual aid. For example, this topic is the meaning of Sunday, a word Sunday in different European languages. Sunday has different origins in different European languages, and on this map we see an etymology or origin of a word Sunday according to different meanings. For example, blue color, find blue. Blue color marks countries which languages have Sunday that originates from a word sun. For example, in UK, we would say Sunday. Germany would be Sonntag. Down Germany, Switzerland, and Austria have some variation of it. Scandinavian countries, Iceland and Denmark, and even Albany on the northwest from Greece also has a meaning of Sunday as day of the sun. Let's find green color. Green color is Central Europe, and the green color represents countries which languages have Sunday as Lord's Day. Okay, In Ukraine, it would be Nedelia, Belarus, Nedzelia, Polish, Nedziela, and also the Balkan country have Lord's Day for Sunday. Orange color. Orange color represents countries that have whose languages represent, okay, I'll take it back. So the green one is no work day, and orange is Lord's Day, because it's lots of Catholicism down there in Mediterranean. So green would be no work day, and orange, you see how important it is to interpret, and orange would be Lord's Day. So we have Domingo in Spain, Dominache in French, and Domenica in Italian. There is a Portuguese, Romanian, and Greece also has those variations. Red color. Red color is for Turkey in this case, and it's Hungary. That's where Sunday means a market day, like Pazar in Turkey. And brown is Lithuania, which has number day. In Lithuania, Sunday means 7th day. Okay. Know your information so you do not look at the map all the time. Think of those weather reporters who maybe show a little bit, refer a little bit to their weather map, but then they look at the audience. They don't want to look, they don't want to lose the audience. Neither do you. Know what is there so you can glance and point, but then still keep a good eye contact. So you're not reading from your visual aid. And that said, please do not put sentences on your visual aid. Visual aid is for your listeners to better understand what you're saying. It's not for you to follow along. Was it helpful to have this map to follow along as I was speaking? It was helpful, right? So think about how your visual aid is enhancing what you're saying, and choose something, if you need to, choose something that truly enhances, truly makes an understanding easier. Okay, so we talked about different types of supporting materials, rhetorical devices, story statistics, results of the study, and visual aids, and we also talk about how to combine them, and we discovered that if we combine them, we are even more effective in conveying our information. We also talk about having a variety of supporting materials, and some topics like certain types of supporting materials and others like others, but regardless of a topic, you want to have a good balance and good variety of supporting materials. Remember that at the beginning I mentioned that the list we're talking about today is not exclusive, and there are more supporting materials out there. And once you start giving more thought to your supporting material, you might explore and you add other supporting materials. Just remember that you always need to interpret that supporting material for your listeners, however you use it. For example, don't just throw a quote at your audience. Spend some time to show how that quote connects your main ideas and supports those main ideas. Just remember to always have your listeners' interests in mind, and they will be grateful.